All right, 5-9 operations with complex numbers, day 2. The last one before the chapter test. All right, so we're going to finish learning to perform operations with complex numbers. So first, let's go back and recall from chapter 1 in Algebra 1 the rules of exponents. We're going to focus on multiplying exponents with the same base and exponents raised to exponents. So if we had x raised to the m times x raised to the n, we could simplify that by making it x to the m plus n. All right, so for example, x to the 5th times x to the 2nd, we add the 5 and the 2 and we get x to the 7th. On the other hand, x to the m raised to the n was the same as x times m to the n. So with numbers, x squared raised to the 5th power, we multiplied the 2 and the 5 and got x to the 10th. This is stuff you're going to need to remember moving forward in this section. So here is an example of the powers of I. Okay, I to the first is the same as I. I squared, as we already know, is equal to -1. I cubed is the same as I squared times I. We know I squared is -1. -1 times I then is -1, or negative I. I to the fourth is I squared times I squared. We can break it down. Equals -1 times -1, which is +1. As you keep watching, if you keep looking for the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th, it's a cycle. It progresses through. Okay? So every 4th is I, every 1, 5, 9, 2, 6, 10 are all -1. It's the process just keeps repeating itself just by adding another I. We're going to be able to break that down and identify what those values can be. All right, so we're going to evaluate the powers of I. We're going to simplify -6i to the 14th. First step, make sure the exponent is even. If not, factor out one of the i's. All right, 14 is an even power, so we are good. Divide the exponent by 2 and write as a power of a power. This is why we need to make sure it's even. Okay, so the exponent's 14. We divide it by 2, we get 7. So I'm going to leave I squared inside the parentheses, and then I'm going to have 7 on the outside, power to a power. Now I'm going to simplify, remembering that I squared equals -1. Okay, so I get -6 times -1 to the 7th. Order of operations, I have to deal with the -1 to the 7th power. Okay, -1 to the 7th power, since it's odd, is still going to be -1. So I have -6 times -1. -6 times -1 is +6. All right, let's look at the next one. Simplify I to the 63rd. Same steps. Make sure the exponent is even. If not, factor out an I. So in this case, we can factor out an I. So it's going to be I times I to the 62nd. Okay. Now, same process. Divide the exponent by 2 and write it as a power of a power. Okay, 62 divided by 2 is 31. So I squared in parentheses raised to the 31st power. Simplify everything. All right, we know I squared equals -1. So it's going to be I times -1 to the 31st. Since 31 is odd, -1 will remain -1. And then I times -1 is -I. There's 2 for you to try. Don't let the fraction scare you, it's just there. All right, rationalize the denominator. Recall from chapter 1 in Algebra 1 as well. Old stuff coming back. Rationalizing the denominator removes a radical, so the square root sign, from the denominator. Now we know that I is the same as the square root of -1, so we cannot have it in the denominator. So we need to work on getting rid of it. Okay? So, for example, 5 over the square root of 3. To rationalize the denominator and get rid of it, we had to multiply it by the square root of 3 over the square root of 3. That gave us 5 squared to 3 over the square root of 9. Square root of 9 simplified to 3. Similar process what we're doing by dividing complex numbers. Okay, so this is dividing complex numbers. 3 plus 10i over 5i. Right? multiplied by the conjugate of the denominator over itself. All right, so remember, the conjugate of a value is just changing the sign of the I, the imaginary value. Okay, so 3 plus 10i over 5i, we need to multiply by the conjugate of 5i over itself, which is negative 5i. Okay, we're going to distribute across the numerator, so negative 5i times 3 is negative 15i, and then negative 5i times 10i is negative 50i squared, and on the bottom we have negative 25i squared. Now we're going to simplify using the fact that I squared equals negative 1. Okay, so wherever there was an I squared, replace with negative 1. Negative 50 times negative 1 is 50. Negative 25 times negative 1 is 25. The last thing we're going to do is finish simplifying it. Okay, I know that I can divide every part by 5. So when you're looking at this, you need to make sure that you can divide this part, and this part, all 3 parts by a value. I can divide them all by 5. Okay, that gives me negative 3i plus 10 over 5. Remember, we want to write it in the form of a plus bi, so the imaginary term is second. Alright, so it's 10 minus 3i over 5. We can continue to simplify this further if you'd like. 10 minus 3i over 5 is acceptable, but you can break it off and simplify it. 10 over 5 minus 3i over 5, and it ends up being 2 minus 3/5 I. Okay, you need to get at least to this point. Simplifying after that is just showing that you can continue to simplify it. Alright, another example. 2 plus 8i over 4 minus 2i. Okay, first step, multiply by the conjugate of the denominator over itself. Alright, so you always change the sign of the imaginary value. So the conjugate of 4 minus 2i is 4 plus 2i. So I'm going to multiply by that over itself. Okay, you need to distribute. So we're multiplying. You got to do it by foiling. So for the numerator and the denominator, you need to foil. Firsts, outers, inners, lasts. So for the top, 2 times 4 is 8. 2 times 2i is 4i. 8i times 4 is 32i. And 8i times 2i is 16i squared. Then for the denominator, you have 4 times 4, which is 16. 4 times 2i, which is 8i. Negative 2i times 4, which is negative 8i. And then negative 2i times 2i is negative 4i squared. Okay. Now, at this point, you're going to continue by combining some like terms that you have. Alright, so 4i plus 32i is 36i. And 8i minus 8i is 0. So we simplify to 8 plus 36i plus 16i squared over 16 minus 4i squared. Alright, now we're going to use the fact that we know I squared equals negative 1. Everywhere there's an I squared, replace it with negative 1. And then you're just going to multiply by that. Okay, so negative 16 times negative 1 is negative 16. And negative 4 times negative 1 is positive 4. And you can combine that 8 and that negative 16, so I get a negative 8 plus 36 on the top and a 20 on the bottom because I'm adding my terms. Last step, simplify everything. So when I look at this, I know I can divide everything by 4. 4 evenly goes into 8, 36, and 20. And divide everything by 4. I get negative 2 plus 9i over 5. Alright, it's in a plus bi form, so you can leave it like this, or simplify it one more step by separating the denominator of 5 to negative 2/5 minus 9/5 I. Alright, there's the last two for you. Simplify them out. Enter your answers online. Last section before the chapter test. Good luck.